if you don't behave yourself, you're out of here. So they're not in for life, but they are in for terms that are indefinite because were given initially such a small amount of power. So when you look at the whole political scene, where is the greatest power? It's in the House of Representatives. And why the House? Because the House controls the money. Without the money from the House, the House is responsible for collecting the revenues and then for allocating them, for appropriating them. So without the money from the House of Representatives, what can an unconstitutionally oriented president do? He can't do much. They have control everything. They pay the light bill at the White House. They can say, "We're sorry, Mr. President. We're not paying the light bill at the White House. You're going to have to kiss these girls in the dark." They have that power. They have that authority. They can say to the Senate, they can shut off the power in the Senate building. The House of Representatives is the key. And if you're worried about what to do in this election on November 7th, put everything you have in that guy from your district who represents you in the House of Representatives. If he's good, support him. If he's not, make sure everybody knows he's not. Get his record out. We have the Trim Bulletin records, as you probably know, on what they've done with the National Treasury. Our founders meant for them, come home and check in. If you wasted a lot of money and if you haven't honored your oath of office, you don't get to go back. And that is where the power is, and that is where the power is at the grassroots. This process that our founding fathers gave us is ingenious, because what this does, it breaks the whole thing down into bite-sized pieces. We can handle a congressional district. There are enough people in this room. You people in this room could determine who goes to Washington from your congressional district. You get that record out, and you let people know what that man is doing with the money and also with the Constitution. You let people in this district know, and you can change the whole face of that district. It's within your scope. But you're not going to do anything with Bush and company. And you're not going to do anything with Al Gore, because they don't work for you. They work for the Council on Foreign Relations. They work for the conspirators. They are bought and sold before they even get to office, because those people who own them don't care which one wins. You're running you got a horse race out here, you got two horses out there. If you own both of them, which one are you going to bet on? Who cares? I bet these guys don't even watch the debates on TV. Why do they care? They got them both. There's only us suckers have to watch the debates and think it's for real. It's kind of like watching a wrestling match and saying it's not rigged. The key to getting back our government is through the House. And if you have a good man, go ahead and support him. But when you send a check, ladies and gentlemen, clip a little note to it. This check is being sent to you, Mr. Who is your representative from here? Who represents?
Charles Bass.
Bass, okay. Mr. Bass, here's a check for $50. It is given to you with the understanding that you're going to honor your oath of office. If you ever violate it, you'll never get another cent. You want to be involved in politics, be involved in politics that way. You can't send that same letter to Gore or Bush, because they're not even on your team. But the man from your hometown is. If you ever violate it, you'll never get another cent. If he got, what do we have, 40 people here tonight or so, 50? If he got 50 letters like that, even with a $10 check or $100, whatever it is, can you imagine this guy, hey, what's going on here? Somebody's reading the Constitution. I better read it. You think these guys go to Washington to read the Constitution? No, they don't have the foggiest idea what's in it. They've never been cornered. They have never been prevailed upon to know what it is that they're honoring when they take that oath. You folks have the power to do that. There's plenty of light at the end of the tunnel. And when you look at the national picture, say, well, we don't count. Oh, yes, you really count. You really count on the national picture, because those bite-sized pieces, even though there's 435 of them, we only need 218. You get a simple majority in the House voting along constitutional lines, or well, even if they're not even patriotic, even if they're just pretenders. The beauty of the way our nation is structured is you can put the biggest phony in the world in Washington, and if it's not expedient for him to move to the left, he'll move to the right. He'll come home and you think George Washington's been reincarnated. I mean, he'll talk Constitution. If that's what you want, you keep electing me and I'll be a constitutionalist. And that's the wonderful thing about this system. You don't have to have a purely moral candidate, because the expediency of political pressure will bring him into line. You might not send him back again. You might, by that time, in fact, once we get 218 congressional districts, the really good guys are going to emerge. You're going to have Chris Case running. You're going to have Bill McNally running. You're going to have people there who know they can win. Why don't we run today? I would never run. Why would I couldn't get elected today unless I lied. I'd have to lie to people, or I would have to do, maybe not lie, but I have to not tell them the things I'm going to have to go along with when I get there to keep from getting kicked out. And if I only do those things that are constitutional when I'm there in today's climate, your newspaper at home will destroy me. But if you have the backing of your people in your district, if they understand and appreciate what it is you've been doing, you get reelected time and time and time again. How many of you ever heard of Larry McDonald? Larry McDonald, the 7th District of Georgia. That's you're more sophisticated than I thought. Larry McDonald from the 7th District of Georgia got reelected. I think he ran the first time in 1972. And the first time he ran, he didn't make it. He didn't get through the primary. Second time he ran, he just barely squeaked in. And guess who? He ran as a Democrat. But the big Republicans always had somebody in Georgia to run against him. They got big money from the Republican National Committee to defeat this guy, even though he was more conservative than the Republicans in office. The important thing is this. Until the year before he died, we presume that he was killed on Korean airliner Flight 007. Before he died, he had 72% of the vote. And I don't know that there was anyone that year in Congress who got a higher vote than that. I believe that was during the elections of, I believe it was 1984, was it not? Yeah, it was 1985, the Korean airliner, in 1984. How did he do it? He went home and taught the people. He voted for things that the newspapers, the papers in Georgia were dead set against. They smeared him in the newspapers. He'd go back into his district and he'd say, I knew I was going to be smeared. Let me explain to you why I did this. You need to know why I didn't support the peanut price support program of the Agriculture Department. There were a bunch of peanut farmers in his district. He explained it to them. And as soon as they understood, they voted for him again. You people need to know why I didn't vote for that increase in Social Security. Half his constituents on Social Security. They voted for him again. They understood the principles. And his vote kept going up, 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 up. It can be done, and that's where the answer is. That's where the key is. And today, you're really not starting at scratch for 218. because we already got 35 good men there. But you're not reading about them in the newspapers. A few of them are women. You're not reading about them. They don't. When a late news breaking story breaks, though, nobody runs to Ron Paul or to Helen Chenoweth or to Bob Barr. Well, what do you think about this, Bob? What do you think about the president's foreign policy? Oh no, they don't want to hear from these guys. They're constitutionalists. That's why you never heard of them. But we got 35. So you're not starting from scratch. There's tremendous hope for saving the country and for saving the Constitution. What we have in the United States today are two levels of perception. We have this level up here, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the official level. The establishment level up here is fake. The real level down here is real. That's the people of the United States. And it is a tremendous idle force. It is a tremendous unused weapon that we have in the United States, because most people in the country are just like you are. They might not know who Larry McDonald is, and they might not understand anything about the separation of powers or the limited powers of the president or the vast powers of the House, but they love the Constitution. They stand by it. We've done some surveys. Gene and I have a friend in Idaho. He spent 2 years. He covered 2 counties. He went to every single house in 2 counties with a survey on how they felt about the Constitution and what they would do if the Constitution were re-enthroned, if the nation were in under the Constitution again. And the results were fantastic. People who were in on the take were willing to give up their support from the government if they could start on an even playing field. They were willing to do that, and they signed his little petition that they would be willing to do that. Every person in 2 counties, this guy lived and slept. He slept in his car. He was so committed to this survey. He was home for a year, went back and did, for another 2 years, did 2 more counties. Well, the question came, someone asked this question, well, yeah, Idaho, it's a conservative state, maybe there, but you're not going to get that anywhere else. Well, he couldn't leave the state, but he had an idea. He went to the universities and he canvassed immediately around the University of Idaho, University of Boise, University State Division in Boise. He went around the college areas where the college professors are and where the students have all been a little brainwashed to have all these socialist, collectivist ideas cranked into their heads. And he only dropped down to 55%. He was getting 75 and 80% there. Even college professors would shake their heads and say, well, you've got a point. If we could start over, if we could start even today, I would move all of my ideology, all my thinking, under the United States Constitution. Fascinating. So he really expected worse, but he was honest enough and objective enough to go where he knew he was in the lion's den and see if he would get any kind of a response anywhere similar to this. Perhaps the most remarkable thing was an article, and in my opinion, it was an article printed by mistake. I'll put this up here in case you want to document it. This article says, study, American leaders are out of step with the public. Now, that shouldn't surprise us too much, but this really surprised me. This is an AP release from New York. American leaders are out of step with the U.S. public, which is more religious and more concerned about moral values than the top people in most fields, such as science, politics, the news media, and education, a major study concluded. It is clear, and they were totally surprised, the people who took the survey. Survey was made by Connecticut Mutual Life Insurance Company, And all they wanted to do was give the salesman an idea of the different levels and professions so they could appeal to these people, know where they are, particularly with regard to their standards. And they would know how to approach them as salesmen. Well, they hit a jackpot they weren't even looking for. The leader of the director of it said, overall, leaders are different from the public. They don't represent the public. Now, this won't come as a surprise to you, and it's not really a surprise to me, but the surprising part is that it ever got printed. And I think maybe this might have been a mistake, because I've looked for this in other places that it's instantly been smothered or taken off the newspaper. Anyway, the director said, we had no idea we'd find this, but there it was, showing up in every sort of systematic analysis, a common thread. It's more than a movement, it's something running through the whole culture. This big gap between teachers, politicians, and the news media, and the people. So this is this big phony thing that we have floating up here. The news media are telling you that other people are like they are, that they're collectivists, socialists, communists, and they don't like, they want everything changed, they want everything collected and redistributed, and that this is a solution to war and poverty and disease and all these terrible things. That's being imposed. That's an idea being imposed from the top down. It is not at the grassroots, but everybody thinks it's somebody else. Jean, my wife and I had this experience in California when we were getting bad news. Surveys would tell us what everybody in the area is thinking. And we'd go around with our John Birch Society pamphlets, handing them out from door to door, and we found out they didn't think that way at all. They thought like we do. And we said, we thought you were the dirty guys that were doing this to us. No, we thought you were. So everybody was blaming somebody else, but this ubiquitous socialist at the grassroots just didn't exist. You go around the whole block and everybody feels this way. They're just like you people are here. The American people are solid, but we're being ripped off. We're being deceived from the top. And that's why we keep having good news. Whenever we fight to preserve the Constitution, we keep having good news. We keep winning. And we're small. We're not even anywhere in any positions of power. Now, share a few of these that I think should be very encouraging. Most state legislators are reasonable people. They're approachable, accessible. You can talk to them. They probably aren't any better educated along the Constitution than anybody else, maybe not as well as you are, but they want to do the right thing, and they really do want to honor their oath of office. When I was at the headquarters of the Birch Society in Wisconsin a few years ago, I got a call from a legislator in Utah who said, "You've got to come out here right away." I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "We have a bill in the House to withdraw Idaho's call for a constitutional convention, the application we make to Congress for a constitutional convention, which Utah had made in 1979. He said, "We now recognize the dangers of it, and we don't want that constitution held, but we need you out here tomorrow. You have to get on a plane and come tomorrow because Senator Orrin Hatch is coming back from Washington to try to destroy our bill. That we were ready to vote on it yesterday, and the Speaker of the House said, well, we're not going to vote on this until Senator Hatch can come out and talk to you people about it." And so the sponsor of the bill said, "Mr. Chairman," he said, "if you're going to have someone here to promote the bill, and I, as the sponsor of this measure, deserve to bring someone out to argue the other side." Speaker said, "That's fine. You bring him out, and we'll have an even debate. We'll have equal time, and we'll have it fair. We'll hear from both sides." So he says, "You got to get out here, and you got to debate Orrin Hatch tomorrow." I ran home, grabbed my bags, told my wife I'm heading for the airport. And the next morning I got there, I walked in the state capitol, and here was Orrin Hatch holding little private conferences in an anteroom at the State House with various members of the House. They were all coming out with little yellow piece of paper. And during the debate, I figured out what that was. The debate started out, we each had, I think it was 10 minutes to make an opening remarks, and then we had 2-minute responses from whoever would ask questions. And this was on the entire floor. This was before the whole, there was, there are 96 members of the House. And so then I finally figured out what the little pieces of paper were. They were questions that he had planned with them to ask. And here I am, who am I to debate a popular big shot like Orrin Hatch? And I was concerned. I said a silent prayer, Nancy. I said a prayer, and I said, Dear Heavenly Father, I said, I don't, in 2 minutes, I can't develop the arguments. I can't present the issue in order to support it by argument. And I said, you've got to help me. And so the most wonderful things happened. The little piece of paper that Orrin Hatch had given these guys were exactly the issues I wanted brought up. So the men on the floor, the men and women on the floor of the House, they didn't have any time limit. By the time they would reiterate the issue, I didn't have to. So all I had to do was deal with the answer. And it was an answer to a prayer. I couldn't ask for more, because in the 2 minutes I could not have framed the issue the way they did. So we're going along, and Hatch is getting a little bit nervous. And so when his turn came at the podium, he said, in order for a bad amendment to become a part of the Constitution, it has to be passed by 38 legislatures like your own, like the Utah legislature. And he said that is not going to happen. And he gave all these documented reasons why, even if we had a constitutional convention that got out of control, it would be killed in the ratification process. Anything that they didn't want. So one legislator, I called Mr. Fotheringham back to the podium. He said, Mr. Fotheringham, do you think anybody in this body, and this was in his little question, do you think anyone here would ratify a spurious amendment, a bad amendment that would harm the Constitution of the United States? And I said, no, Mr. Lund, I do not. I said, I don't think there's one person in the Utah House of Representatives who would ratify a bad amendment. But I said, let me tell you what happened years ago in this same room to your fathers, when your fathers sat in these seats. Your fathers were here in 1933, entirely committed to killing the repeal of Prohibition, because Mormons did not want liquor back on the free market. The people in the state of Utah did not want the open sale of liquor in the state. When Congress considered the repeal of Prohibition, the repeal of the 18th Amendment, and the 21st Amendment was the amendment that repealed the 18th Amendment, I said, your fathers who sat here decided when that amendment came along, they were going to kill it. They were not going to ratify it. And all kinds of bells and whistles. We must have done something right here.
Just while there's a break, really quick, I'm going to pass around a pot here, and hopefully you can help out by doing donation, because this is where all funds feed.
You ruined it. I just on the verge of telling these people that we do this out of the goodness of our hearts. I'm not being paid to be here tonight, so this is to help our program. So the question he asked was, would anyone here ratify a bad amendment? I said no. But I said, your fathers who sat here were totally ripped off with regard to their privilege of voting against the 21st Amendment. The amendment came from Congress. after the liquor lobby had looked at Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 gives Congress the option of sending ratification of amendments to conventions in the states, conventions of people in the states. And Congress wrote the rules for that. And while your fathers were sitting here thinking they were going to kill the 21st Amendment, the whole issue was taken outside this room. And it was voted on by people who favored liquor by the drink and the free access to alcohol in the state of Utah. And the legislature sat here wondering what had happened. They never had a chance to vote on it. And I said, do you think for 1 minute that if a convention did something you don't like, you'd ever see it again? They wouldn't bring it to you. They'd do the same thing they did in 1933. I said, as a matter of fact, that's how the Constitution was ratified in the first place. It was supposed to have gone to the state legislatures, but there were too many legislatures who wouldn't give up that kind of power in those first 13 states. So the Founding Fathers bypassed the legislatures, sent it to conventions according to the rules that they had drawn up on organizing, ratifying conventions. I said, if it can happen in 1933, I'll assure you, if a constitutional convention does something you don't like, you're never going to see it again. And when the votes were taken, we beat Orrin Hatch in his own home state with all of his friends. We beat him by 4 votes. The legislators made a moral decision. At that point, they stopped being political. They started looking out for the Constitution. In 1995, we faced a serious crisis, a constitutional crisis, a proposed conference called the Conference of the States. And as we looked at this movement, we could see immediately that the Conference of the States was not just a meeting of states getting together to talk over their problems, but it followed exactly the pattern that was followed in 1787 by Washington and Hamilton and James Madison and Benjamin Franklin. It followed the same procedures. We looked at their papers, we looked at what was going on, and we realized that the states were appointing delegates the same way they were appointed then, by state resolution, the same way it happened then. When the delegates showed up in Philadelphia, they had pieces of paper, resolutions from their state legislature authorizing them to come to Philadelphia to meet with other members of the other state delegates to make fundamental changes in our form of government. The resolutions that were being passed by the Conference of the States authorized people to go to one place. They hadn't picked the place yet. They wanted it to be Philadelphia, to make long-term structural reforms. They said, we're just not talking issues. We're not going to argue about issues. We're going to make structural reforms that'll give power back to the states. Well, there was no structural change that took the power away from this in the first place. It was usurped. It was taken by pure brass by our federal government. It was taken from the states and violated the states' rights and violated the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment. So there was nothing they could do. You can't make an amendment saying obey the 10th Amendment. There was nothing for them to do because it was already in place. So we knew something was fishy about it, and we got on board to try to stop it. The first thing I was asked to do was to write an article. So I wrote this article, which came out in the magazine, the Con Call, with Governor Leavitt's picture on there. Governor Leavitt was the Utah governor was at the head of this. At least he was the point man on it, that's for sure. After talking to him later, I don't believe he ever wrote it because he wasn't that sophisticated. He could not have written this plan because the plan included things that he didn't know. For example, George Washington gavelled the convention to order in 1787 when 7 states were there. When 7 states showed up, that was a simple majority of the states. That was regarded as a constitutional majority. And had no more shown up, which of course they did, it ended up with 12. Everybody but Rhode Island showed up. But had it just been left there, they would have proceeded with the adoption of the Constitution we have today. What did Governor Levitt call for in his paper? 26 states. When a simple majority, when 26 states are present, the Conference of States will be convened. How did they authorize the delegates? By resolution, by the state legislatures. They vested in those legislators whoever would be appointed to go the sovereign